Hey, welcome back to another episode of Coffee with My Dad. We ended. I forgot to introduce you last time, so I'll introduce you properly. This is Benjamin. He's joining us. Dad's here with us as well. And so at this point, you will have met all of the Promenco boys. Well, I can't even say that now because there's more of. There's Judah.
Yeah, because technically there's three of them that probably don't get on camera yet for a little while.
No. Goodness. Okay,
That's
well, we
weird.
used to just
That's really weird to think about. There's more Promenco boys.
It is.
Well, we ended. All of us, I'm sure, were like wanting.
Okay, well, hold on. Sorry. No, hold on. Before you get into that, we just have to acknowledge something.
Okay.
You said in the last episode you're not drinking coffee, but you're pretty much doing this. What are you sitting on?
I'm on a yoga ball.
Okay. just for our four viewers, right?
I'm trying to sit still, but you just get in the way. I forget.
I would totally be bouncing on it too if I were sitting on a yoga ball.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead. Sorry, continue. Oh wait, hold on. Whoa.
Timer.
Logistics timer.
Last episode
Timer.
we started the timer doing 20 minutes, so that'll keep
Rolling.
us in the range of 20 minutes.
That's
I
right.
had a question, and Dad, you had the same question, kind of picking up where we left off.
Mm-hmm.
What makes how would you guys define a good leader? What is a good leader?
It's a loaded question in a way because it's how somebody interprets the question. They're going to go a couple different directions. Because in our conversation, we talked about two leaders, and one of them I would call a really good person. The other one I would call a really evil person. Although, was the evil person a good leader? Right? Like, what does good leader mean?
Yeah.
What does? Yeah, I have a thought, but I want to hear from you guys first.
Ben, go for it.
Well, how do you guys define good? Like, what is good?
Like the
'Cause
opposite of bad.
Yeah, but like in like good leader, how do you define the good? You know,
Mm-hmm.
like where? Okay, let me ask you these two questions. Okay.
Okay.
For the first question, take all emotion aside and just by pure logic, how do you define good? And then flip it with all emotion and love for the Lord and for people, how do you define good?
Well, good is relative to some standard, right? It's an assessment. And so what are you assessing against? Like, is something, there's a couple different definitions of good, I guess. If we were to just, again, taking to Ben's point, take the emotion out, we would have to consider several different definitions, which I'm not typing and looking them up right now. But one of them would be, an assessment against a standard. Another one, and maybe one of you guys can look it up too. Another one, like when I think of goodness as a quality or an attribute, that's different than, did somebody do good or did somebody do bad? That's judging their performance against what was expected. Mm-hmm. But is somebody good? That's not as objective a measure, right? That's going to be maybe weighing against. Maybe it is actually. Maybe now that I say it out loud, maybe it is. But is somebody good? Is maybe leveled against morals, right? And what we see as morally right and wrong. I don't know.
Yeah, you kind of touched. I just looked up the definition of good, and you kind of touched on all of them. I'm so sorry. I keep dinging.
Yeah, for the record, we're not out of time yet. We're still going.
No, I'm in several family group chats.
Happens.
Okay. So moral, that which is like moral or right, possessing, displaying moral virtue, giving pleasure, enjoyable or satisfying, having the qualities required for a particular role, to be desired or approved of. These are all several different definitions of good. So I think maybe the definition of good depends a little less on the word itself and maybe a little more on the context that we're using it in. So when we're defining what is a good leader, I think maybe you guys could kind of share what your thoughts are given that context. Like, what definition of good would you apply?
And you also, to Ben's point, I think you have to also define leader.
Oh, yeah.
Like, what is a leader?
Well, I'll look that up too.
Let's ask Google.
God bless Google. A person who leads, I use Google so many
A
times.
person who leads, you cannot use the word in definition.
Yep. Problem solved. Podcast done.
Okay, this is funny. A person who leads or commands a group, organization, or country. So, principal player in a music group? No, that's not what we're talking about. There's a lot of interesting definitions that I would not have thought of as leader. But I think a person who commands a group, organization, or country seems like a more applicable version or definition. Interesting. Okay, another vocabulary.com says a leader is the one in charge, the person who convinces other people to follow.
Can I give you the definition I use in the book?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So here's the definition that I have in the book, and it's aligned to what you just said. Leadership is the process of guiding, influencing, or directing individuals, groups, or organizations towards achieving goals in a way that makes people want to follow them.
Yeah.
Okay. So, a good leader, back to the question, how do we know a good leader and a bad leader?
I would say that a good leader is one whom in what's a good way to word it? Like a good leader is somebody who has a inner desire, purpose, belief, and leads a group of people to the common goal or greater goal of that inner desire or belief. Whether or not that goal at the end of it leads you to, I'll just say, hell or eternity, right? That's kind of the line between good leader and not good leader, in a religious aspect of it. But I would say a good leader is one whom people follow, and the goal that he has in his heart, everybody follows and they get to, right? Whether that fails them or not, right? That's kind of the tricky.
Yeah, whether or not the goal itself was worthy or good or not, did they get to the goal? Is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
What other thoughts do you have, Derek?
I think an effective leader is just that, somebody who gets people where they wanted them to go. I think a good leader is somebody who did that, but they're doing it morally upstanding. Like they have. Like I can't think of a good leader and ignore the moral definition of good, which would be a standard, right?
Yeah, whether the person is good or bad, and their leadership are directly, like, you cannot separate them, is what you're saying. If I'm a good person and I'm leading well, I'm a good leader. If I'm a horrible person but I'm leading well, then I'm a horrible leader. That's your take.
Not quite that extreme. I think perhaps I could personally be less of a good person, but if I lead in a way that is moral and virtuous toward a moral and virtuous goal, perhaps. But I mean, at least if I'm just defining what is a good leader,
Yeah.
then I'm doing that in a moral or virtuous way. Maybe I'm a piece of garbage, but if I led with integrity and all of the things that make one perhaps a good leader, which we're defining at this point. So we're like, I'm thinking in circles.
Right.
Yeah, so it's less to do with the person, but I think that's easier to do when the person has those morals, like kind of not nailed down, but at least they're real to them. Which, to your point earlier on the other episode,
Mhm.
the best, well, to both of your points actually, the best leaders are ones who lead from conviction. Like they're not just salesmen; they really do believe what they're saying.
Yep.
I think that the best leaders do that. There are also, like, definitely cult leaders that have certainly manipulated people into things that they knew were bad, but they knew they were getting something from it, and so they were effective in their leading, but they were not good. Regardless of what they were leading them to, the way that they did it, how they were leading, how they were actually getting them to follow, was not moral or virtuous.
Yep.
But I mean, I feel like those are kind of like, there's the really effective leaders, and then there's the fringe effective leaders. Like, that's not most of the people, but I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. I'm thinking in very abstract terms. But everything's valid at this point.
Sorry.
Was that 20 minutes?
No, it was just somebody calling me. Sorry.
We got to phone in for the podcast.
Right? Somebody has something to say about what you just said.
That would be kind of neat, actually, if we had a phone number that people could call. Like if we had maybe more than 4 people, or if one of those 4 people just wanted to
I was
chat.
gonna say we got like 1 in 10 people that are gonna call. It's gonna be mom. Mom's gonna
Right.
call in.
I just wanted to
Yep. Yeah. No, that's cool. Okay, so yes, side note, that would be cool to do that someday, have people call in. But to keep us on track, this is not an easy thing to answer. This actually is a really complex question, like a good leader, bad leader, because it really forces you to think about things like even one of the definitions you read, Derek, was basically said something about does this person make me feel good? Mm-hmm. And this leader could make me feel amazing and be terribly ineffective at getting me to the goal. Or they could also be coming from a place of not good. I don't know. I just lost words for how to say that, right? They could, like you said, like a leader, they know what they're doing is wrong, but they're getting something out of it. So they actually are believing in what they're doing, knowing that it's not in your best interest, but I'm really good at manipulating you so I get what I want out. I would not call that a good leader. Even though I would not call that a good leader. I wouldn't call that an effective leader. I would call that a charlatan, manipulative con man, right? But not a leader.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think the difference between that person and Hitler, and funny enough, I did a report in high school on Hitler.
I remember that.
And found out he had syphilis.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, he wasn't, like, right in the head. Like, he was actually kind of sick. And he was really interested in art. And he tried to get into a Jewish, like, art school. And they totally rejected him. His art was too dark. And they did not validate him at all. And so there were several other factors that he brought up and he used to influence, like, his followers, if you will, to commit the atrocities that they did. But he was coming from a place of being, like, deeply hurt within himself and very insecure and being actually mentally ill. Like, if you just objectively observe, like, his daily ins and outs, there's a couple videos of him. Like, he's not acting like a normal, decent person would. And I won't go into the details of all that.
Right, because he was not a normal, decent person. He was sick. Like you said, he was sick.
Right. But to your point, Ben, people still followed him, so it is worthy of stepping back and asking, oh, why did they follow him? And I think maybe not for the sake purely of like, how can we become good leaders, but how can we avoid falling into that trap again? Because the awful thing is, it wasn't just one man that did a lot of evil things. It was one man that influenced a lot of other people to commit a lot of terrible evil acts, and that had I can't even I can't unpack the scope of like what that effect had. But I think for us, we have this responsibility, I believe, to learn from our mistakes in the past. I think that's one of the great benefits of history, is learning, where did we go wrong? Where did we miss it? And I'm so glad that we learned about that in school, so that we were made aware of it. It's horrible and it's awful, and it's a little too much to talk about sometimes, especially for people who are a little more directly impacted by that. But I think it's important, because if we just ignore that and ignore why they followed him, like if we just choose to put that on a shelf and maybe cover it up with some happier books about leadership today, then we could fall into the same trap of thinking that we're following somebody who is good and right and following the truth. But if we play that out to the logical conclusion, to the end, we get to where that leader wanted us to go. Maybe it's actually not good. It's not moral or upright. It's evil, you know?
Yep. Yep. It's important for us to know, like Ben said it in the other episode, like, what's our source of truth, and why do we think that's the source of truth, and be critical. And there's a lot of things going on even right now in our country today, and they have been for years, and they're going to keep going this way, where so many people are just, they're influenced and they're swayed by people that are very charismatic, and they're very engaging, and they're doing things that people think leaders do, and people will follow them, and like, yes, this person, I'm behind that person, and you're behind that person, so you're wrong, and I'm behind this person and they're right. And it's not too often that people stop and think, like, what about this person makes them so right?
Yeah.
Like, they're heavily influencing me, or they were, but why are they? And stop and do that, and stop and think about that. Because you're right. If we don't do that, we can go down the road that people went, back in the 1940s and 30s and 20s, that even led to all of that.
I want to ask, well, what is truth? I won't, because we probably don't have that much time.
That's a 5-part series of podcasts. We will do podcasts until we go to heaven on that one question alone.
But I will share something that I heard just in a brief little interview, and I forgot the guy's name. But he said one of the things he said that he missed was evidence. One of the things he missed from his childhood was evidence. So-and-so says, okay, where's the due process? Where's the evidence? And his point was, well, today we don't have that. Today so-and-so says, so it must be true. You don't need to prove it. You don't need due process. And the whole room kind of like got a little quiet when he said that, because we don't, like, our culture has shifted from being, well, we could just talk about that. But I think that's an interesting thing to think about. What is the evidence in whatever I believe to be truth or not?
Yep. It's so important. I mean, think about all of the news. Like, journalism used to be one of those things that if you put stuff out there that wasn't true, you got eaten alive by your own kind, right? Other journalists would crucify you. Yeah. Today, people purposefully put out misinformation, and they're, I will say, posing as journalists, right? They're writing articles on a news site, and then people believe it because it looks like a news site.
Yeah. Which makes me think we probably don't value the truth. And another episode in one of the 50 million episodes we could talk about is why don't we value the truth today like we did back then? Maybe like on a large scale.
Oh, I would never have I wanted to have my grandparents on a podcast than I would for that podcast. Like to compare things to their time, like your great grandparents to like what's going on now with you, like you and your kids and their future. Well, here's the deal. So here's what I'll leave you with as we close this podcast out, because we got a minute left. I'm watching the timer. Here's my challenge to you guys. And I think you've already accepted this, but I'm just going to put it out there for the record.
Mm-hmm.
Lead the people around you well from a place of sincere care. Ben talked about servant leadership before. Like, lead your family, lead your dog and the people in your company, Ben. Like, seriously, the people around you. Like, we lead people in so many ways we don't even realize it, not just because we have a position. So take care to know if you are influencing people, why are you influencing them? And is that influence in their best interest or not? I'll leave you with that. That's deep, man.
It's actually really heavy. No.
All right, wrap this one up lightly, Derek. Guys, honestly, I really enjoy this because we had conversations around the island in the kitchen over the holidays that we just did this for hours and hours and hours and hours, and it was so good. And I appreciate you guys an awful lot. I just want you to know that you will always be my boys, but the young men that you've turned into is amazing.
Well, we had help. We didn't get to where we are today without a lot of patience, a lot of influence, a lot of discipline, a lot of love.
It's how God worked with me every time to help you out.
So thanks for keeping us alive, and thank you for leading us well. You said lead people well, and I have a little, one of my many questions is, how do I be led well? Something I want to ask you, but if I lead well now, it's because I've had a good example to follow. So thank you for being that.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah. Amazing.
I pull the Jesus card. I just do what I see my Father doing.
Yeah.
Love you guys.
Love you too.
Love you too.
Later.